Good morning. My name is Kyle Gatlin. I am the pastor, and I have one question to ask you. Can one decision change everything? Can one decision change everything? Well, the short answer is yes. Let's go home, right? No. Psychology Today said that there's a really good chance that we make about 35,000 decisions a day. And I started thinking about it. Like this morning, I had to make a decision whether to hit the snooze button or not. Then I had to make a decision whether to take my CPAP off or not. Then I had to make a decision whether to actually get up out of the bed. Then I make a decision, should I put a shirt on or not? Then I had to make a decision, should I go to the bathroom or go get the coffee? And well, I'll go get the coffee. So I go to the coffee, and I got to choose what type of coffee I'm going to have. Then I have to choose the kind of mug I'm going to put it in. Then I got to choose how much Splenda to put in. Should I put it in ahead of time or should I wait till afterwards and stir it? Then I should make a decision on where did I drink my coffee? Do I sit in the recliner? Do I sit at the bar? Do I sit on the couch? Do I go outside? I had to make that decision. Then I'd make the decision, am I going to read first? Am I going to drink first? Am I going to blow on the coffee to cool it off? All, 15 to 20 decisions in less than a minute. That's a lot of decisions. So I can see 35,000 decisions a day maybe in the realm of possibility. That's not the type of decisions that I think we ought to talk about. Right? Because some people can be tempted to think every decision that I make, ask God for it. Like, God, should I take a step here, a step here? No, we're not talking about that. Can a decision change everything? Can one decision change everything? It did for Mike Zahner. Mike Zahner chose to drive home on New Year's Eve, 1983. And as he was driving home out Beverly Jeffers Highway, coming home from another party were a group of juniors from Citronelle High School. Cass Potter was driving an AMC car. Mike hit him right in a curve of where my dad regularly had a garden. Cass was killed. His other 3 classmates survived. One decision changed Mike's life, changed Cass's family's life, truthfully. After that, he was the youngest in his family. He was one of the whoopsies that his mom and dad had later in life. When I was a senior, Cass was a sophomore. Cass was, he and I were co-section leaders of the percussion section in the band, but that was not the case. Cass was the section leader. Cass had the skills, he had the talent, and he was going to do some wonderful things in the area of music. But one decision changed everything. Now that's 2 extremes, isn't it? That's 2 extremes of what I'm talking about. Little daily decisions that we make every day, and then this huge decision that impacts life. Most of us don't live there. Most of us live somewhere not in the extremes, and that's sort of where I want to land today, right? Like the decision that I made to join Farmhouse Fraternity at Auburn University in 1983. That decision changed everything. That altered for the rest of my life who my friends were, who my best friend was, who I had accountability with for the rest of my life. And literally what time is it? 10 o'clock? So 27 hours ago in Houston, Texas, I ate breakfast with Bo and Chuck. Chuck was a pledge brother, then Bo came in the year after. We all lived in the fraternity house together. 1983. 2023. That decision changed my life. When I made the decision to go to graduate school in Kentucky, that decision changed my life. It changed it on a personal level and changed it on a professional level. And I will admit to you, that decision to go to that grad school played a lot into the fact of where I'm headed next in my ordained ministry. That one decision. Our character today that we're talking about is Daniel. Daniel is one of those crazy people because we believe, we think back to that one story we've heard about Daniel that we'll get to. We think that's crazy that Daniel survived that one thing that we remember about his life. But there's a lot more to Daniel than that. And I make the case today that Daniel made one decision that altered his life, that changed his life, that changed everything for him. Let me take you back. Daniel was in Jerusalem. He was an Israelite. He was a Hebrew. People of Babylon came, and this was actually prophesied that Israel would be taken over by Babylon. Babylon came in there, just wiped them out. And then the leaders of Babylon, particularly King Nebuchadnezzar, had made the decision, hey, if there's anybody good looking, that's smart, good health, let's take them from Israel back to Babylon. Okay? So all he took was Auburn graduates. So he got all these guys from Israel, left everybody that was average or below average, seriously. Just left them there. We're going to take back the smartest, the wisest, good-looking, good, healthy guys. We're going to take them back. Daniel was in that group that was taken back to Babylon. And then the King Nebuchadnezzar, wanted those smart, wise guys from Israel to hang around with his smart, wise guys from Babylon. He lumped them all together, right? And it was in the midst of this group of people. There was basically 3 years of training he was supposed to go under with all these wise guys. It was in the midst of this time that Daniel made a decision that changed everything. Isn't it crazy that one decision can change everything? It's a crazy thought, but it's a thought that I think is crazy enough for us to buy into and for us to say, yeah, I need to be the crazy person that makes that decision that can change everything. What was Daniel's decision? Well, when those guys were meeting together, they were living together, they were doing everything together, which meant we're going to eat together. And the king had a special place for these people to eat, and they had special food. But Daniel came from a place that did not eat these type of foods. Daniel ate only kosher foods. Now, I think there's a lot of reasons that why God chose to set aside certain foods to eat. I think primarily it was for protection for his people with these dietary rules, but people can debate that all along, but I think that was a big part of it. Anyway, so all these foods that Daniel could not eat were being served. And Daniel made a decision, I'm not going to eat those. Because here's what he said. Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. This was a very conscious decision not to eat the food that all the other wise guys were eating. I'm not going to eat any of that. And what was left when you take out all the non-kosher foods was basically vegetables and water. So that's what he chose to have. This was not just a dietary decision. This was not just a dietary decision. This was something that Daniel determined in his heart. So here's the deal. When Daniel got into Babylon, the first thing they did was change their names. They changed the Hebrews' names, right? So Daniel comes in, Hebrew name. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, all Hebrew names. And you're going, who is Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah? Aren't they on the Smurfs? I think they're on the Smurfs. But no, that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We know those names. We know their Babylonian names. We don't remember their Hebrew names. But here's the deal with Daniel. You can take the man out of Jerusalem, but you can't take Jerusalem out of the man. And that's why we find that Daniel was a captive, but he was not a prisoner. Daniel was a captive, but he was not a prisoner. Yeah, it's true. Daniel was not going to be able to worship like he had been worshiping. I mean, he lived where there was a temple, right? He had all the trappings in Israel and all the rules and regulations of how to worship, and he knew how to do all that, and that's, boom, he's transplanted. No temple. No temple. So he knew he couldn't do that anymore, but I want you to understand that worship is simply a reflection of what's in our heart. And Daniel quickly learned that God is not tied to a place. That God is not tied to that temple back there that he would never go back to. And he knew he would never go back there. And for us who are New Testament Christians, we understand, what is the temple today? The temple is our body. And we worship God and honor God with all that we are. Daniel determined that he was not going to be a prisoner. You know what a prisoner is? A person who is or feels confined or trapped in a situation. That's what a prisoner is. A person who is confined or feels trapped in a situation. He made that decision. I am not going to be a prisoner. Am I going to be a captive? Yeah. Am I never going to return home? Yeah. Am I a prisoner? No. No, I'm not. Daniel was determined that he was going to live a life that honored God and not just in the food he ate. Just because he was in an unfamiliar place, a foreign land, it didn't matter. He has chosen to honor God with everything that he has. It was a decision that was not made in haste. It was not like they laid this food down and he looked at it and go, that's pig's feet. I can't eat that. He didn't do that. He made this decision before that food was put in front of him. And I make the case that he made it in Israel. And if he didn't make it in Israel, he made it on that trek from Israel to Babylon. Had a lot of time to think. Had a lot of time to determine in his mind what he was going to do. Because Daniel's decision was not about food. It was about life. You know, he could have easily done this. He could have easily said to the three amigos, hey guys, come here. All right, they got this food here. You know, I've never had pork. Have you had pork? No. I hear with barbecue it's pretty good. Anyway, so hey, let's go ahead and eat this, but when we're by ourselves, we'll pray and we'll worship to God, but let's go ahead and eat this, right? Can we agree to do that? He could have done that. He could have done that. He could have chosen this one place to go along and compromise his life. But that's not who he was. That's not who he was. He said, no, I'm all in. I'm going to honor God with everything, my entire life. We have the opportunities multiple times a day to compromise our faith. We have that opportunity each and every day. And we have to make a decision each and every day. I'm going to honor God in every aspect of my life. I'm going to do that. Am I going to honor God with every aspect of my life? Because it's real easy. Because see, we can compromise in little areas and no one will ever know it. Because we can show up on Sundays, we can show up in our small groups, we can pray, we can sing, and nobody will ever know. But we will. Jesus is looking for those of us who are all in. Who are all in. Those who desire to not just be his disciples when it's convenient, but to follow him all the time. That's Daniel. Daniel was all in. And because of his choice, because of Daniel's decision, God gave him a gift. See, Daniel made that decision, but then God did something. God gave him a gift. Here's the deal. Daniel was given a gift of interpreting dreams. We know he's already smart, right? He was already picked as a wise guy, smart, good-looking, type guy. We know all that about him, but God gave him a gift of interpreting dreams. And not just interpreting dreams, God gave him the gift of knowing what the dreams were to begin with. And we get this from, again, Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. It troubled him. He called all of his wise guys together and said, hey, listen, I had this dream. And it sort of floored me. And I really need you guys to tell me what this dream means. But here's the caveat, dudes. I want you to tell me what my dream is and then tell me the interpretation of it. And of course, all the wise guys are going like, why don't you just tell us your dream, then we'll tell you the interpretation. Well, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't born yesterday, because he knows that people that are employed by the king tend to say yes and say things that are favorable to the king. We've seen a lot of countries get in trouble with that in the past, right? So they said, just tell us the dream. Nebuchadnezzar said, no. You guys are the smart guys. Tell me what my dream is and interpret my dream. And if you can't, what good are you? And I'll just kill you. Well, that went real well with a group of people. Daniel hears about it. He huddles his three amigos up again and says, la, 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 la. No, he didn't say that. He said, guys, I want you to come here. We got to pray about this because King's getting ready to kill all of us. We're lumped in with these guys. We're in this all the way now. We're now wise guys for the king. And he wants this dream and he wants it interpreted. They got together. All four of them pray together. And then Daniel says this, verse 24, chapter 2. Therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and spoke to him as follows. Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me into the king's presence, and I will declare the interpretation to the king. Short story, he did. He went there and told the king, hey, listen, Nebuchadnezzar, hey, this country, this nation of Babylon, it's going to go away. Now, you're good, but the nation of Babylon is going to go away. So God gave him this awesome gift of being able to not only know an interpretation, but actually know the dream. Now, if you know anything about how kings treat people who are under them, normally the king shoots the messenger. When somebody tells him something he doesn't want to do, doesn't want to hear, he just kills the messenger. So God protected. He gave this gift to Daniel, but then he protected him as Daniel exercised this gift. And he even protected him one other time. Because down the road, Nebuchadnezzar had another dream. And didn't know what it meant. This time he actually brought Daniel in and said, hey, here's my dream, what does it mean? And Daniel's news wasn't so good this time, because Daniel said, King, here's the deal. For 7 years, you're going to go bat crazy. I mean, you're going to go off the rails. You're going to be one of those guys that walks around and talks to himself and is oblivious to the world around him. That's who you're going to be. Oh, by the way, you eat grass for 7 years too. And obviously, if I was Nebuchadnezzar and I was king, I would go, I wouldn't like that. I would have done away with Daniel then. But God had gifted him this, and then God protected him. So Nebuchadnezzar took the news. He did his 7 years of craziness, came back, and then we moved to another period of time. Daniel is older. There's a new king. Nebuchadnezzar has now died. And it appears that Daniel has not exercised his gift of interpreting dreams for a while, because this new king, Belshazzar, has something special happen to him. Belshazzar's in a room, all of a sudden sees a hand, literal hand, writing words on a wall. Okay? That happens to all of us, right? You see a hand just out of the pier writing on a wall. And it sort of freaked the king out, freaked Belshazzar out. And of course, all of his wise guys go, I don't know. I've never seen anything like this. I don't know what those words mean. And then the queen jumps in and says this, there's a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of your father, illumination, insight, and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, appointed him chief of the magicians, conjurers, Chaldeans, and diviners. This was because an extraordinary spirit, knowledge and insight, interpretation of dreams, explanation of enigmas, and solving of difficult problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Let Daniel now be summoned, and he will declare the interpretation. Did y'all catch the queen knew about Daniel? The queen knew about Daniel. Yeah, she remembered that he did dreams, but no, did you catch everything else? You see, Daniel had made the decision. He was not going to be a prisoner. He was going to be captive, but he was not going to be a prisoner. He made that one decision. I'm not going to defile myself. I made that decision. And he lived it. And he continued to live it out. She said he had an extraordinary spirit. He had an extraordinary, she saw it. In other words, Daniel did not hide anything. Daniel was out there living this life, a life that he had made the decision years ago, many years ago. We're talking decades. He made this so many years ago that he was maybe a captive, but he was not going to be a prisoner. He made that decision. I'm not going to defile myself. He made that decision and continued to live it out in this foreign land. He was a follower of the one true God. He wasn't going to bow down to any of the Babylonian gods, and he stayed true to that. That one decision that he had made, he continued to live out. The queen noticed. The queen knew. And here's something I want to remind you of. If you're a crazy person, it will be noticed. If you're a crazy person, it's going to be noticed. You can't conceal crazy. And guess what? That's what the world needs. The world needs to see people with an extraordinary spirit that have made a decision to honor God, to not be held prisoner by anything in their life. Well, Daniel came through again, told the king bad news. King let him live again, but the bad news for the king was Daniel said, hey dude, here's the deal. Your reign is about to end. In fact, the whole Babylonian Empire is going to crush. And shortly it did. So the Medes and Persians come along. They are now ruling, and they're in charge of Babylon. That's the new government. They got new people in charge. The leadership changed. The government changed. But I want you to remember this about Daniel. When circumstances change, you don't have to. When circumstances change, you don't have to. Daniel kept on being who he was. Even with a change of leadership, listen to this. Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps because he possessed, here's the word again, extraordinary spirit. And the king intended to appoint him over the entire kingdom. So he had stayed true to who he was. And God's still trying to protect him and honor him and lift him up. He's just going to be like Joseph, going to be lifted up, just like Joseph in Egypt. He was going to be lifted up. But the other wise guys said, we will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. In other words, they didn't find anything to bring Daniel up on charges to get him out. They didn't want him in power. Why? He's an outsider. He's a Hebrew. We don't want outsiders in charge. We don't want a man of God in charge. We don't want somebody sold out to God in charge. So they went to the king. They went to Darius and said, King, basically, hey, we need to honor you. We've taken over Babylon, and people need to really understand who you are and honor you. Let's make everybody pray for 30 days to you and to you alone. That's all he can do. For 30 days, next 30 days, if anybody prays at all, it only can be to you. And Darius said, rock me, mama, like a... No, he said, okay. He signed it off. He signed off on this deal. Everybody's going to pray to me in this nation. What did Daniel do? When Daniel learned that the document was signed, he entered his house, and in his roof chamber he had windows open toward Jerusalem. Did you catch that? Open. And he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and offering praise before God, just as he had been doing previously. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed in his life. He had made that decision as soon as he got into Babylon, as soon as they tried to take Jerusalem out of him, he made that decision. He's not changing. He's not changing. Everybody else in the kingdom did exactly what they were supposed to do, but not Daniel. You know, we've had times in our country's history where people stood up to unfair and unjust laws. And it cost them their lives, cost them financially. Eventually, some of those unfair laws have been changed. Daniel was wide open. He was open about this particular thing. Praying to a man, no. Never going to happen. And I'm not going to hide the fact that I will never pray to a man, that I'm only praying to God. Windows were open. Everybody could see him. He had not changed who he was. He had not changed who he was. And those wise guys, of course, were waiting on him to do this. Why? Because he'd always done it. They knew exactly what was going on. 3 times a day. They knew he would be praying. All they had to do was sit and watch, have plenty of witnesses. Took it back to Darius and said, hey man, Daniel was praying to his God. Truthfully, Darius liked Daniel because, again, Darius was getting ready to raise him up to second in command, basically. So Darius didn't want to do this, but he had made a ruling. He had put it in writing. He couldn't go back on it. And threw Daniel into the lion's den and sealed it up. The word tells us that Darius couldn't sleep that night. So when he got back up the next morning, he rushed out there, opened up the cover to the lion's den and said, Daniel said, yeah, I'm good. Lions have been fasting for a while, so we're good. Darius pulled him up, and all the other guys that tried to get Daniel killed, he threw them in there, and the lions broke their fast, right? See, Daniel made a decision to acknowledge God in everything, in all areas of his life. Made that decision early on, and it was brought to light just on the dietary restrictions. But that decision would influence the rest of his life. He couldn't get away from it. And God honored his life because he had honored God. When circumstances change, you don't have to. When circumstances change, you don't have to. Things will start changing for us. They'll start trending the wrong way, in a way that we don't desire. Life's going to get a little more difficult. Your family's going to make decisions that you don't agree with. You'll get a new boss. You'll get fired. They changed the rules in the middle of the game. You don't have to change. You don't have to change. Everything around you can change. Your friends, your workplace, your school, all that can change. All that can change quickly, in a heartbeat. But you don't have to. But you don't have to change. What happened to Daniel is really summed up by Jesus. Therefore, everyone who confesses me before men, I will also confess him before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. Things change, but you don't have to. One decision can change everything. I don't know if you realize it, but when you read the rest of the story, King Darius, he declared, basically said, God is God. He made that declaration to worship Daniel's God. He told his people that. And I don't know the rest of the story, what happened to all those people. Don't even know what happened to Darius. But that decision that Daniel made, it changed his life. It changed everything for him. Because he chose not to be a prisoner. And he chose never to change. I'm not going to change no matter my circumstances. And as he confessed God, God honored him. What decision will you make? If you've not made a decision, then you have made a decision, if you get my drift. One decision can change everything. What will that be? As the band comes forward, they're going to be leading us in one more song today. And the decision that you make to sell out your whole life to God is one that can change everything. You make a decision. You're making a decision one way or the other. Let's today make a decision that can change everything. As we stand in worship, know that the kneeling rails are open. If you need just a time to get away from your pew for a little bit, kneeling rails are open as we worship. Would you please stand?